Hi everyone, welcome today to our HPH Zoom. I start with a mission statement. Helping Parents Heal is a non-profit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the helping process, in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone regardless of religious or non-religious background and allow for open dialogue. The attendance today at HPH meeting is voluntary and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to even learn about afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of HPH, and we ask you to take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Thank you so much for being a part of this gathering today. Over to you, Anna.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'll introduce Laura Toop to our group. Laura Toop is a coach, mentor, speaker, author, and business owner, grief, loss, trauma, emotional health, and well-being. She became a widow before time, and according to her, it is one of the most overwhelming, isolating, and angst-ridden experience one can go through. Losing your health and your career as well as she did only heightens those feelings. Finding purpose and passion for life and living again is possible. This is what Laura teaches us. I think Laura is an amazing person and I don't have more words for her, but I'm very excited to listen to what Laura has to tell us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Anala. Thank you, Chandra, for inviting me to be here amongst this lovely group of ladies and your community. I feel exceptionally honoured to be asked, to be quite honest. So thank you. So I thought kind of share a bit of my journey and kind of the journey that's happened. So, but by all means, if I'm talking too fast, because I know I can get a little bit excitable at times, do go slow down. So apologies if I do, but that's my intention. So 5 years ago, my life spectacularly imploded. I lost my husband, my health, and my career in quick succession. And indeed, my then 4-year-old nephew, Hugo, said to me, "Auntie Lollipops, now that Uncle Chris is dead, you have nothing." Okay, thanks, Hugo. You know, what do I do with that? You know, I have a 4-year-old telling me I have nothing. He did, however, say to me, "But it's okay, Auntie, I will look after you for 100 days. Since then, I have moved 90 miles around the M25, which is a long way in the UK, not necessarily a long way in the rest of the world. Bought a house and made it into a home, made new friends that are far deeper than the friendships I had before, and built a business in which I'm passionate about, and that is supporting others through their loss and their grief. I am the loss coach, and my aim today is to help you, or to help show that you too can find hope amidst the nothingness, and to take you through and share with you how, you know, in my acknowledgement of the chaos and overwhelm that happened after the loss, that there was very much a need to meet that, a need to then act if there wasn't to become an ongoing problem, but how the power of people is what has kept me going through this journey, and still today keeps me going through this journey. So I don't need to tell you what it feels like to lose somebody that you love is the most overwhelming, chaotic experience one can go through. I cannot begin to imagine the loss of a child. I don't have children. just if I lost one of my nieces or nephew, how devastating that would be. And so I can only begin to imagine the pain that it brought for you and your families. But for me, I was thrown into this world I didn't know, I didn't recognise. This huge void had opened up. Everything that I had worked hard for, you know, cherished, loved, put energy and, you know, obviously sometimes money in, was gone literally in the blink of an eye, and I was just reduced to nothing. I felt like I was walking through treacle in this parallel universe where the rest of the world was going very, very fast around me, and I just couldn't keep up, and I hadn't got a clue where I was going. I just kept feeling everything was coming at me. It was exhausting. It was terrifying in some respects because I just had lost everything. I hadn't got a job to go to anymore. I hadn't got somebody by my side supporting me in the fact that I had no job, and I didn't have my health either. And even more scarily for me was the day that my husband was buried. The next day I started feeling exceptionally ill, and then I basically took on all of the symptoms of pancreatic cancer is what he died, but I became severely jaundiced and I had every single symptom that he had, but I didn't have pancreatic cancer. And it was desperately frightening, and I was in a hospital all rigged up and nobody knew what was going on and what was wrong with me. And I then just ended up kind of staying for a month, where in the end they realized I didn't have pancreatic cancer. However, they sent me home kind of not really knowing what was wrong with me. I returned to work for a very short period of time, only to discover I had got a new boss who had been promoted above me and didn't care much for me. And behind closed doors, he bullied me until finally, at the end of 2015, I was let go and was kind of in this space of where next. You know, I really did feel, you know, my nephew was right, absolutely nothing. I fell into, you know, a relationship, and he kept saying to me, well, you know, but Laura can't fill the space that your husband's left behind. And I didn't want him to fill the space because he wasn't my husband, but that was clearly obviously how he felt. And he ended the relationship, and I was absolutely distraught, and I really didn't know what to do. And I just knew I needed to do something, because something had to be better than the space that I was in. And so I took myself off to the sunny island, and because I love the sunshine, I knew that was the only way I would take myself out of the picture, because I realized taking myself out of the picture was the only way to see the bigger picture and to see myself in the picture. So I headed off to the sunny island of Aruba. I stepped off the plane, and I was welcomed by the taxi driver. He said, "Welcome to the happy island." You can imagine it was absolutely everything I did not feel. Happy, most definitely not. You know, Aruba, I had no idea where it was. I just knew it was going to have sunshine for me, and all I wanted was sunshine. I knew that was the only way I was going to stop, because I needed the world to stop. I needed to acknowledge where I was at. Everybody kept telling me and having an opinion of what I needed to do next and what I needed to do and how I needed to set. And I was going, whoa, world, stop, I can't do this. So, you know, I had to fly myself 5,000 miles away to achieve that. And so, because I knew I couldn't keep pushing through. So otherwise the conflict just continues. And trust me when I tell you, I have tried to push through loss before in previous, you know, losses in my life. And the conflict just continues when we don't actually acknowledge it. And we start taking on what everybody else wants us to do and to fill that space. So for me, you know, I sat there on the sun lounger 5,000 miles away, well, basically not really doing very much for the holiday brochure, I will say, and that I really just, I don't know, I just cried, I think, for probably the first 2 to 3 weeks, and just constantly questioned myself, how am I going to cope? How am I going to cope? This is not meant to be my life. This is not meant to be how things are meant to be. You know, I was 42, and I had been at the height of my career. I had been with my husband, you know, like absolutely adored, and my health up until that point had been exceptionally good. And all of that was just gone. You know, what on earth was left? You know, literally for me, it felt like nothing. But actually, as time went on, for me, it was that whole thing of the tears started to dry, and I kind of started to find some words. And at this point, I think it was only words. I think I sat there with my sketch pad, and I would write various words as they came to mind. But with little bit by little bit, I converted that question from how am I going to cope to what am I coping with? And I started to embrace the feelings that I was having, and where were they coming from? What did they mean for me? And what did that mean for what I was going to do next? And so there I was, sort of contemplating life, as I say, not doing much for the holiday brochures. Kind of everybody kind of steered clear with me because I was obviously the lady on her own, which stood out like a sore thumb. I was there at the bar in the evening, reading my book, writing notes, etc., etc. And, you know, kind of gradually people started to talk to me, but, you know, I kind of needed that space to be somebody I wasn't, as it were, to be slightly anonymous and slightly discreet. But with time, as I say, I changed the dialogue with myself, and I really noticed the change, because it became from, you know, how am I going to cope with, as I say, to what I was coping with. And I asked myself 3 questions. I asked myself, who am I now? What is important to me now? And what makes me feel truly alive? Because I really wanted to feel truly alive again. Because I felt everything that this multiple losses had created for me it had restricted me. It taken away my freedom. It taken away all the things that I loved most in the world. And I had been reduced to this space where I felt nothing, numbness, and restricted. And those 3 questions have become the basis of everything I have done since then. And, you know, it's not for me a overnight thing. I have had to continually check in with myself as to where am I, where am I going? Is this right? It's not been an easy journey. I will say that, you know, while I made the house into a home, the renovation didn't go necessarily that smoothly. At the point at which it was a bit of a shell, so I'm sat in the kitchen here, which is the piece that was going to be the calm oasis away from the busyness of outside world. Well, 2 years ago, it was an empty shell, and I could see a foot down, and there was no back wall to the back of the house, just as the builder tells me, Laura, I'm afraid I'm bankrupt and I can't carry on the job anymore. And I'm kind of looking at it going, oh, and then he tells me, by the way, the 20 grand that you thought you'd spent on the windows, actually we haven't, and the windows don't exist. So I'm sitting there going, you know, I'm feeling really, really like, oh my God, the world is falling apart. But I drew back to the strength of knowing who I am, what was important to me, and those 3 questions. And I found a way forward, safe in the knowledge of the work that I had done, which I affectionately called Project Me, back on the beach in Aruba back in May 2016. And as I say, I found a way forward. I knew I wanted to, well, I knew I couldn't control the fact that the builder was bankrupt, but I knew I wanted the job finished. I knew he was good at his work. I just hadn't predicted he was going to have a marriage breakdown and he was going to have problems with his ex-partner, the father of his son. So, but I worked with him because it was important to me that here was somebody in complete pain that still needed an income, that just through no real fault of his own, he still needed some income. I still needed a job doing. So I renegotiated the contract, but seeking from within what I felt was really important to me. And so I sit now in a kitchen that is complete, and the house is sort of complete, apart from a slightly leaky roof. But, you know, for me, it's, you know, there have been times when it has been exceptionally difficult. And I have wanted to give up. You know, just even moving in here, my neighbour was having a bad day, and he decided that it was me making loud noise. And so he contacted the council and said, my neighbour's terrible, she's making so much noise, I want you to serve her with a ASBO, which is an antisocial behavioural order in the UK. So needless to say, I was a little bit surprised to receive this, and thinking, what would I do? What would my husband have done? And he would remain very calm. And I was taking back the strength that I'd gained from all of that reflection, that acknowledgement I had done. And I drew my strength and I went round and I had a conversation with him. And I didn't react back, I responded to him. As much as I felt so pained by somebody, you know, deciding to send me an ASBO without talking to me first, it was a case of, okay, let me breathe, be true to myself and step forward. And so I went and chatted to him, and it turned out that his dad sadly was threatening to commit suicide and doing it very, very visually across Facebook. And it had reached a pinnacle and he had decided to sadly lash out. And I just happened to be the person who crossed his path that morning, sadly. And certainly for me, it was that whole thing of, I felt grounded in the work I had done following the grief that I had worked through, I had acknowledged, and felt I had been true to the memory of my husband, because he would have been very calm, but also how I wanted to show up in the world as well, and to learn from the experience too. The guy is now a good friend of mine, I hasten to add. But it's still, you know, I have wanted to give up many, many times. But what I recognize is that I could sit in my grief. I describe grief like a teaspoon of salt in a cup of water. We can, when it happens, it's terribly, terribly unpalatable. Then with time and us taking some action, slowly that water becomes, and when we're taking action, we're adding water. And as time goes on, that water becomes a little bit more palatable to drink. The salt's still there, but it becomes slightly more palatable to drink. But it takes action, and the action isn't always necessarily that we are physically moving. Sometimes that action is reflection of where we're at and how we're feeling, and acknowledgement of that. And then with a little bit more time, we need to find a different vessel because we've added insufficient water. But again, the salt is still there. And that is how I see that I have kind of acknowledged, I've added the water by taking action. Have I done this alone? No, you know, I had my project, my plan, that got me started. That was sufficient for my motivation to get me going. But what I recognize is the power of connection, the power of community, the power of conversation. So the power of people in order to support me, to uplift me, not necessarily to do things for me, because, you know, I felt, and one of the reasons I chose a coach to support me was because I wanted to feel empowered. I didn't want to feel useless and this nothingness that, you know, I felt when everything had imploded. I wanted to find ways that I was going to gain in strength, that I could take a step forward. So, you know, I looked to communities in order to support me, not too dissimilar to this one. There are obviously many, many different types of community out there. I looked to what I call torchbearers, those who have gone before and have trodden the path of widowhood and bereavement before, to take inspiration, to take thought. I've looked towards others who I call light leaders, who are those for me whose values I aspired to and whose words resonated with me, that helped me not feel like I wasn't so alone in the world. People like, and forgive me if you don't know these people, but people, for example, like Brené Brown. There's a gentleman called Randy Pausch who wrote the book The Last Lecture, and it resonated with me because he sadly lost his life to pancreatic cancer, but he was a lecturer, and he gave his last lecture all about, this was his gift he was giving to his young wife and his young children. And in it he talks about, you have one way that you can choose to be in life. You can either be Tigger or you can be Eeyore, and I wanted to be Tigger. So this book resonated very strongly for me because I can be somewhat excitable. And as I said to Chandra earlier, was my little 3-year-old niece says to me, Auntie Lollipops, you get so curly hair because you're so crazy, she says, so crazy. And your curly hair because you're so crazy. And I said, oh, Rosie, why do you say it? She said, well, it's so tightly curly. And she says, it's all crazy. And she doesn't have an answer for us. So sometimes I can be excitable. And sometimes I can be Tigger, but sometimes I can be quietly Eeyore as well, because sometimes we need to be Eeyore. But as I say, you know, I think with the power of community connection and conversation, I have gone from somebody who felt there was nothing and to this space where I have taken little steps forward, and the steps forward have gradually built up to this point where I do feel that now I spend more time of my life feeling in a joyful place, and that there is something there for me that is worth showing up for, and that life has given me back a meaning and a purpose that allows me to keep moving forward. And I suppose that is for me the thing I always share with people is, no matter how dark it can get, and it does get dark, I'm not going to deny there have been times where it has been exceptionally dark, and I've wanted to go back to, you know, hide away from the world, but I knew vehemently I couldn't return to the unhelpful coping strategies I've had in the past, because I knew pushing through wouldn't do it. I knew numbing the pain with alcohol, trying to control it with eating disorders, been there, done it, got the t-shirt, just doesn't work, because at the end of the day, you can do all of those things and it's still there. And I think for me, it was only when I acknowledged it and really embraced it did I find a different way. And so I suppose the thing I want to share with you all, most of all, is that even in that dark time, you can find hope amidst this nothingness, and that we are always more than nothing, and that together is most definitely better. So I hope that sort of shares a little bit of my journey with you all. I mean, there's so many more things I could share, it's like, but so I'm going to throw it open to you for some questions or feedback, thoughts, whatever. As I say, without taking you through minute details of the last 5 years. Jo, did you have a question?
I did. I have got a question, and then in the chat, and I'll put your questions here, so do I type or anyway? I'm a talker. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really interested to grasp the process of the Project Me. You took yourself to sunshine, and you created your own space of such. And how did the rest of that unfold?
So for me, it was literally those 3 questions. I just sat there and I started pondering them, literally, and it was just words. If I showed you the sketch pad at fun, I couldn't back then, and it's something that really frightened me was I didn't realise that jaundice basically is when your body's shutting down. And I didn't realise that on top of the widow brain that you have because your body's gone through immense stress and that's your body's natural process, I had this whole extra layer on top of the fact that my body had just decided it had enough and it was, you know, bailing out basically. And I didn't realise that until quite some time later. So it really frightened me that I couldn't remember things and I couldn't string a sentence together. So it really was only words to start with. And I think there were things like, so who am I now? What did I love? What did I notice about things that had happened in my life? What did I reflect back on? So having got through 14 years of an eating disorder, that I took on, if you want to call it that, when I had a water skiing accident when I was 13, where I basically injured my hips and had to go to bed for 2 years in essence, and then I had bilateral hip surgery and back surgery in order to help me to walk again. I missed loads, so there was a loss in that, which I kind of never really realised the impact of it. I chose to control it by food because I didn't understand the emotions. I just, all I could see was that I was not the same as everybody else and that everybody else was doing something more than me, and I wasn't connecting with people. My mother took over because she wanted to nurture. So hence why I'm obviously vehemently against having things done for me rather than to be empowered. Because you can't learn for yourself at that point. I did get over the eating disorder, not however in the way that they got me to do it, which was to effectively stare at, you know, I never really understood why you asked an eating disorder patient to write down in minute detail, you know, the number of calories in something or the food that you've eaten. I could tell you how many calories to the nth degree a bottle of water would have. I didn't need to focus on it anymore. I needed to focus on things that made me happy, to readdress the balance. The event that had happened to create the eating disorder, I couldn't change. It happened, you know, and that's kind of how I saw Chris dying, was I couldn't change that. As much as I wanted to change it, it was not within my control to do that. So staring at it, you know, a bit like having an open wound and staring at it and picking at it wasn't going to make any difference. I had to acknowledge it. I had to nurture it. I had to understand it. So I was, for example, very angry. So one of the explorations of my anger was and I was angry with my husband because, again, he had tried to protect me and not given me, passwords to be able to access things. He hadn't given me full details about what he wanted for his funeral, all of this stuff. And then he changes his mind and decides that he wants to be buried and not cremated. So I'm then Googling, how do you bury somebody? You know, all of those things left me feeling quite angry. And I had to explore what was that anger. Well, I realised that anger was because I wanted to have open and honest conversation with people. Not to necessarily agree, because I believe that we should have our own opinions, because that's what the richness of a conversation is about. But so that we can understand one another. So unsurprisingly, I'm therefore very passionate about, no matter how difficult the conversation, we have the conversation and share it was. So it's no surprises that I went to talk to my neighbour about the ASBO I was served, because it was important to me that I understood where he was coming from. As much as I was really hurt myself, it was really important to me. There was something going on, as well as whatever I received. And that gave me the greatest gift, though. And it was, my father died 11 months after my husband. And we didn't have a very close relationship, but he and I had a very honest and open conversation before he died that basically went along the lines of, Laura, if I feel I've failed you because I pushed so hard to provide an income and to push with my career, I was not at home to support and look after you and to be there for you. I feel a lot of what's happened to you in life has been on account of me not being there for you. And that made me really sad, because I didn't know that. And he had lived with that for effectively 35 or so years. But I think that conversation would not have happened had I not done that acknowledgement through the Project Me, had I not sat with myself and considered where is it all coming from. And so I do consider that as a gift. And actually at my father's funeral, much to everybody's nervousness, I did stand up and I did talk, and I talked about my father's gift to me, and it was about the power of honest and open communication and how important it is, no matter how hard it is. So as I say, I think those questions and bringing it to my acknowledgement and recognizing where it's coming from and what am I then going to do with it, because I think that's the whole point, you know, as I say, about the how do we cope versus what are we coping with. Well, how do I cope with the anger? Well, if I don't know what the anger is about, how can I answer the how? The thing is, our natural instinct is to go to how, because we're doers. We all do. In the same way, the instant of space created in front of us, we'll want to fill that space. We don't want to sit in it, almost because we're afraid of the space and what might happen in that space. But the question isn't about how, the question's about what. And that is the big difference. And it's asking those questions of yourself. And I just literally worked with, well, why did I do that? You know, what made me do that? And I acknowledged how much social conditioning I had had in my life, and how much I was living to society's requirements versus living to what I was actually naturally loving. You know, I stepped foot out on a path many moons ago, believing I was going to be an accountant. Why was I doing that? Basically to please my dad at the time and to kind of do the thing that everybody else did. Absolutely hated it, and do remember being in the back end of some part of London and my manager having a go at me about doing a red tick, not a green tick, and I'm thinking, really? This is what life is about? At that point I knew accountancy was not my game. So needless to say, I still carried on pushing on through, doing what society tells me. So I peeled back the layers of kind of how many things were I doing because society was telling me, and what did Laura want? You know, what was Laura's voice? And I really had to find my voice again. And you know, I recognized I loved hearing people's stories. I loved conversation. Stories allowed me to have a window into somebody else's world, that I could see something different. I love to be able to support people. I love to learn. And all of these things were the kind of the words that were coming together. And I started then just kind of evolving that as to, well, where's that taking me? What does that mean for my work? What does that mean for the home I want? And then I started asking myself, well, you know, I know that's going to get me started, but I know, you know, if I've got nobody keep pushing me forward, then how do I keep going? You know, because my cheerleader had disappeared, and you know, it's hard. You know, and I didn't want to go back to the crazy hours that I was working before, because you know, like, there was zero life balance. That was for sure. So for me, it was, you know, being really mindful of, within this new world that I was creating, that was true to myself and true to what I call my brand me. So out of Project Me, I recognize what brand me is, or was, and I think that's the thing, is brand me actually hasn't changed. If I look at what I discovered through that work, and I consider where I was probably 20, 30 years ago, the constant is me in all of this. And I just hadn't allowed myself to be me. I had allowed myself to be the socially conditioned me and shown up in however, but that's such hard work, because it's not me, oddly enough. So yeah, as I say, I think it really did give me, like I said, loss made me feel really restricted, and I wanted to be free. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to live beyond boundaries. And on, you know, my 6.5 week stint, which was only meant to be 2 weeks, but I kept extending it and extending it, that, you know, I peeled back all of those layers, and I really did rediscover who I was. And boy, gosh, my life would have been a heck of a lot easier had I discovered that a few years ago. You know, hey, we've got to learn it at some point. But
thank you so much.
no, my pleasure. So Ali's asking, what do I think of the stages of grief? Does it fit with my journey? Stages of grief. I always hesitate when I consider stages, because I don't think there's anything linear about it. And that's partly because, for me, grief is a collection of emotions. And actually, we don't recognize that that is actually what grief is. And so my grief is different to your grief, because I may have been more angry versus somebody else feeling more sad. You know, only we know what the nature of the relationship is that we've lost. So we know the grief that we're experiencing, is how I see it. So there is definitely some kind of process that goes on, in that you recognize that grief has created a gap, and there's a gap of some kind of learning in order to be able to fill the gap that's got to happen. It could be happening all the time. I don't think I realized how much I was grieving the loss of my career until 3 years later, when I happened to be on a training course all around grief and its many forms and how it affects us. Until then, so that was, you know, 3 years after my husband had died, and it really hit me that, you know, I was suddenly like hugely overwhelmed with sadness, tiredness, because my brain was just computing of how much energy I put into work and how it wasn't there anymore. And that really shocked me. That was definitely not in. Yes, it was a process in its own right, because, you know, I went through recognizing it was a gap in my life and that there was a whole load of emotions, and I needed to learn what was going to be in that space. Did it sit in any broader linear process? No, because I'd already grieved, you know, Chris and my loss of Chris. That felt, you know, that was obviously the obvious part to stop, but I never expected all the other parts. You know, ironically, when the carpets got laid in here, and, you know, the final touch, I got immensely emotional over that. And I genuinely felt like I was grieving, because it was like the completion of something that Chris and I had started in another county sort of 5 years previously. So I think there's nothing linear about that. It just was the moment and something that resonated with the relationship that I had with my husband that meant it was meaningful for me, and it felt like I was experiencing grief. So does it fit with my journey? Yes and no, as much as any stage has ever fit in anybody's journey. And I definitely wouldn't say mine's been linear, because I think curveballs have surprised me. Things that I didn't expect, you know, like putting carpets and final touches into this house. In a minute for Sundays, I wouldn't have expected that. I would have expected, you know, an anniversary to have triggered me. And, you know, ironically this year, it wasn't necessarily my anniversary that triggered me, but more my dad's birthday and anniversary, where my mother, because of lockdown, is on her own, and because of her health is socially isolated and hasn't seen any of her friends, and her friends are very important to her. So I felt a wave of grief, because I knew what that feeling was like, of feeling alone and feeling limited in what I could actually do. And I think that made me sad for her and sad for myself too. And so again, grief wave, but I never would have expected that, I guess. And so there's nothing linear about that for me, and God knows what stage that fits in the grand scheme of the Kubler-Ross model. It's just this bundle of stuff that we experience. Working on the questions on Project Me would have also had some challenges. What were they? And so, yeah, so the question I frequently ask myself is, what's stopping me? And is what's stopping me my own fear? You know, because one of the things that I promised my husband, he made me make 3 promises, and one of them was that I would step out and stick to my intuition and my gut instinct, and I would lift my head above the parapet. Which, you know, that's all easy to say, but, you know, actually doing it, you know, is quite a challenge. So I have to push myself sometimes to say, come on, are you just wanting to keep safe here, Laura? You know, is this just, you know, do you really want to hide? So I definitely had to step out of the shadows, and I have to gently challenge myself, and I do have to sit back occasionally. And so more often, obviously we can't now, but it is one of the reasons why I wanted this great calm oasis away from the busyness of life, was because I wanted a space where I could come back to me and ground myself, so that I could then not need to fly 6,000, 5,000 miles away, or, you know, I mean, I did do closer trips, I will say, just to stop and to shut the world out, but I knew that wasn't going to last on an ongoing basis. I knew I was going to have to speed up with the real world at some point. I couldn't keep getting on a plane, or now I can't get on a plane at all. But I recognise I'm my own worst enemy, and that's hence why, particularly in the early stages, I saw a therapeutic coach rather than an outright counsellor. And there was a very real reason I did that, was because, yes, I wanted the opportunity to talk. So there's the counselling bit, or the therapy bit, but I also wanted the ability to feel empowered, to have the light shone back on me, and to, you know, be able to see that I could take the steps forward. So, and that's the coaching bit, because I knew that I needed to step forward. And so I had my coach basically sort of offering me a safe space, as well as helping me effectively with the momentum and what I call TLC of my Project Me. And to keep checking in and to keep helping me when I didn't necessarily want to shine a light on what I was hiding from, to keep myself stepping forward, because I knew I couldn't do it alone. I knew that, you know, very, very clearly. And And I also was very afraid, and it is a fear. I did not want to go back to the eating disorders where that had completely consumed my life. And back then, it was my whole entire life revolved around this eating disorder. And I'd gone from somebody who'd had to be hospitalized because she was abusing 300 laxatives a day and had got herself down to 5 stone and collapsed in the office. I'd got myself from that to being able to be in this place where I could go and hold job down, had an amazing career, all the rest. I did not want to go back to that space. And so it was almost fear driving me that didn't want to go back there. That drove the other impetus forward for me to move forward. And then it, as I say, little by little, I felt I could come out in the world, as it were. And it's not, it wasn't overnight that I felt I could have lots of conversations with people or step into communities and talk more openly. I had to do quite a lot of one-to-one work with my coach first, but all of that allowed me to keep putting the water into my teacup, and eventually I had to change the vehicle or the container. And for me, it's all of that has changed it. And I don't know whether you've ever heard of the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is the art of golden repair. This idea that when something is broken to what looks to the outside world beyond repair, that it can actually, through careful attention with beautiful gold leaf, can be brought together to make something even more beautiful. And having read that and the whole essence behind Ikigai, that for me was kind of just this sort of vision for me to keep going, to keep putting one step above in front of another. I hadn't got somebody to get up for. The only person I had to get up for was myself. And therefore it's very easy to go, the computer says no today, I'm staying in bed. And so I had to find something to keep me moving forward. And maybe in the beginning it was fear that got me started, and the promise to my husband that I would, and it was obviously another one of the promises he made me make was that I would continue the journey that I'd started, and that he didn't want, in his words, 2 lives to be lost. But like I say, that's easy to be said, than actually the person who is left behind and having to face this new world alone without the things that you cherished, that you loved, that you put time into, and that you were hoping that you were going to have future with. So what do I do? Sorry, as people had a question, it goes off the screen. What do you do that feeling of, what do I do with that feeling of having a hard life compared to others who have it really smooth? How do I overcome that? How do I overcome? I suppose, do I feel I've had an exceptionally hard life? I guess I don't. I suppose that's the thing. Some really bad things have happened, and many things that I haven't shared today. But I suppose through the acknowledgement and finding a level of meaning for me in which I can find meaning in life stepping forward, I have found a way in which I can step forward. I know that if I sit and dwell and go, it's so unfair, it doesn't serve me. It doesn't get me anywhere. If I take this house, I could have sat there and gone, why is my life not as easy as everybody else in this street? Their house is all perfect. Everything else is, going so well. Why is my house? Why is it my builder who's told me he's bankrupt and he effectively run away with 20 grand of my money? Why is that? Why me? And I could sit there going, why me? But that still doesn't get the house finished. That still doesn't get me moving forward. that would only leave me sitting in a house that's incomplete. And I think it's ultimately kind of seeing still the possibility of what can happen when confronted with the situation. And for me, what I wanted was this calm oasis for this house. You know, I created that out of the Project Me. That is what kept me going. What was important to me was the way in which I worked with him, that I was calm, that I understood where he was at, that we found a way forward to work together. And that was what was important to me. And then we worked forward. So I just renegotiated the contract. He got paid. I got my 20 grand back, albeit in installments because I just paid him less. And I got my house finished. I still got the end result. The end result, okay, didn't happen within the hoped 9 months, more like 2 years, but you know, it happened. And I couldn't have expected all the things that happened. But as I say, for me, that's kind of how I see the world. And it definitely helps me for sure, keep going even when the challenges come. And they do, you know, and still have. So Joe is saying that is quite possibly the key of feeling like you haven't had an exceptionally hard life, balanced with the knowing that you haven't had an easy one either. Perhaps. And I think it's, you know, what I recognize is that, you know, lots of people have it very easy throughout their life, and then suddenly it hits them and they have never been given some of the skills, they've never had the opportunities to learn a level of resilience. You know, if I take the pandemic in the UK, not that I really want to talk about this, but and how people are responding differently to it, you know, they're not used to, many of them, suddenly having everything taken away from them because they're so used to going out there to get something to help them keep going. You know, whether it's a holiday or a new car or a new something or a new sparkly, shiny, something bigger, better, but it's always out there. They're not used to looking within to find the strength, to see a different way forward, to find the creativity. And for me, I think that is where you start to become stuck, is that while you're busily looking for everything, the solution out there, or somebody else to bring the solution to you, that's where you end up getting stuck and not finding a way forward. So any other questions? I think, oh, Joe's asking, what do you think makes a good mentor or coach, and is there a difference? For me, it is absolutely about rapport, about listening, about meeting somebody where they are at. So a lot of the clients I work with, they are in chaos and overwhelm. There is no point in me saying to them, right, you know, what's your goal for today? You know, a goal for today is just not, you know, forget it. It's let's just work with where we're at. And I'm renowned for my post-it notes and flip chart paper sessions. Everybody jokes about my 3-meter island in this kitchen that is actually was never meant for cooking on it. It's actually just a giant whiteboard for my my post-it notes. And, you know, that's just me dumping out my mind and reorganizing my mind. But that's where I meet my clients. But do I think there's a difference between mentor and coaching? There's a very fine line. Do I think the underlying skills between a coach, a counselor, a therapist, a mentor, it's about rapport, it's about listening, it's about meeting somebody where they are at, and basically to seek a common understanding to find a way forward in whatever shape or form that is. And that's the place I meet my clients, and pending what their need is, I will, somebody described me as organic, I will flex based on that. And that was always the way I wanted to be, was to be fluid and organic, to allow freedom for myself, but also for those with whom I work with, because we are all unique. Yeah, we do all have the potential to heal ourselves, just one step at a time. I think so. I totally agree with you, Anal. It is, we can't always see it. And trust me, I've been in those dark places where, you know, I haven't been able to see it. And I have had the right coaches, and I've had different coaches and mentors over the time, pending what my need was at the time. And by having them there to shine a light back on me, so that, you know, I could sometimes, you know, I talk about shine the light into the darkened room so that I can find my way to the light switch and turn it on. I don't want them to turn it on, I want to turn it on, but sometimes we need somebody else to hold the torch. So have I worked with many parents who've lost a child? I haven't worked with many parents who've lost a child, I will say, Ali. I have worked with a couple, but that's it. So you know, I'm very aware that that is not something that I have particularly done now. I meet, as I say, clients with where they're at and what their need is. So I recognise some of what I do is very much, and what I've talked about today is very much based on the experience that I've had. But certainly when I worked with the two clients who'd lost a child, the work was very much around where were they taking their life, what did they, what, I don't really mean the word meaning, what meaning were they going to take, because that's not really what it's about. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Mo Gaudat, who used to be CEO of Google X, and that he rather lost his son tragically through a routine operation. And his son Ali, he remembers every single day, and he says, I cry every single morning about him, and you know, but then I go, no, the work I'm doing is because I know that Ali, this was what the message he was giving to me before, because he'd had this very surreal conversation, is I think how he described it, with Ali before he went for this operation. And he has taken that conversation and now is doing what his mission is 1 billion happy. And he sets out with, you know, back to this whole thing of we can choose to be happy. It's how we choose to show up in the world. It's how we choose to see things in the world. And his work is very, very interesting, and he talks very openly about it. And I think that is where I've met the clients, is when they've been looking to take the next step, to take their sort of pain and create something that makes them passionate for life and living again. Does my grief affect your health issues and motivation to work? My grief definitely affects my health, in the sense that when I'm smiling because when because they never really got to the bottom of what was wrong with me, they decided they thought it was something wrong with my digestive system, which is typical, happens when you're dealing with grief, because it affects your organs and all the rest, and your digestive system most. That's just the upshot of grief. They didn't remove part of my digestive straight away, but they did later that year, only to discover 18 months later that they should never have done that. So I now suffer the consequences of, but the way I look at it, and I don't know whether this is necessarily appropriate, but the consultant has been struck off because he inadvertently cut a man's testicle off in error. And so I sit there going, well, at least I can still eat, and I can still, but you know, occasionally when I don't look after myself, when I push myself too hard because I'm so desperate in my desire to support people, that I think, you know, I have to remind myself to look after me. And, you know, everything starts with me, and this idea that, you know, I have to look after the heart first, because if the heart's not beating, it ain't going to pump blood around the body. And so for me, it's that that's where grief affects me, is that I just have to occasionally remind myself that, you know, I left behind the 14-hour working days. You know, that was something I was leaving behind. I'm not supposed to be bringing this into the new world. But that's where, for me, it's hard. So, but motivation to work, no, because I guess I'm passionate that nobody should go through pain, that there is a way forward with the right support, the right guidance, the right patience. You know, I you know, like I say, I'm exceptionally patient with my clients because I expect that, or accept that they are where they are. You know, a lot of my clients have often come to me and they've only felt they've been able to email me to start with. And so I will work with them on email. Which, as you can imagine, as somebody who, you know, coaching and counselling is, you know, is from a counsellor's perspective, coaching therapy perspective, better when you can see the person, not necessarily for, you know, the person who's, you know, wanting to seek the support. But I've found a way for it to work because that's where the client is. And if that's where the client is, that's where I meet where them at. And it's not about me, it's about them. How did I motivate myself? In terms of, I think a lot of it came from the Project Me work that I did. There was the initial motivation. Motivation gets you started, but it's momentum that keeps you going. And it's so that it's those things for me, where it is the community, the connection, the conversation, the coach, that has allowed me to keep going. And so for me, that's very, very important, because I know naturally I have a dip about every 11, 12 weeks outside of lockdown, where naturally I have a dip, whatever happens. Within lockdown, because I can't go out there to get outside, get fresh air, go on a holiday, nurture the inner sunshine, it's more like 6 to 7 weeks. And I recognize that. So I actively book in slots in my diary that are about conversations with people who I know will get me, or who I know will inject a level of energy into me, and we'll have a conversation. You know, a lot of it, you know, I've been supporting a lot of people who are suffering with business grief, obviously slightly different context, but my background, Life Mark 1, was business transformation and consultancy. I was the one who was thrown into the chaos and told, make it work. So I've been doing that, supporting that for one-off people. And so there's a whole bit that excites me about that, that's outside of my remit. So yeah, for me, I think that is what helps me. Motivation gets you started. It's seeking those things to keep you motivated, ongoing, to keep your momentum. You know, whether it's, for me, I know it's learning. So I will sit on a webinar and encourage my brain to learn something new. It's knowing the things that, as I say, that what make you feel alive, that allow you to keep moving forward. So hopefully that will answer that one. So I think I've answered all the questions.
Yes. I love
questions.
There were a lot of takeaways for all of us from what you said, Laura. But before other questions come and before we wrap this up, I want you to talk a little bit about the Grief Cafe and a little bit about what you are seeing this forward. I know that we had a conversation about feedback.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, so back to, you know, my desire for honest and open conversations. So one of the things that I facilitate at is a grief cafe, which in essence, people arrive, and there's one this Sunday at 4:30 GMT. And basically it's free to arrive, and you join a table and we just start talking. about, and there's all sorts of grieving going on, from loss of parents to a loss of child to, we're all in different places. But where I want to take this for me is another stage further, where it's this ongoing. TLC also stands for my business, which is the loss connection. So TLC, sort of ongoing community, where there is this sort of buddying momentum, because I recognise we can all get ourselves just about started, but it's keeping going that is immensely draining and immensely exhausting. And how do you do that? And so where I'm looking to do is kind of build more of that community, of this TLC community, where these grief cafe type drop-in conversations can happen more frequently, at all sorts of different times, and where people can drop in. And I did at the end of last year a series of what I call Ask Me Anything sessions. So I bravely said, okay folks, ask me anything about death, dying, widowhood. And I got a whole series of questions back through that and answered that. And so, one thing for me is to do live sessions of that, where people can come and just literally ask me anything. I think the valuable bit, which I'm pursuing in the UK, which will be bigger, but is the need for people to, it's still back to this whole honest and open communication piece, but that we need to learn at school more about loss, what happens, educate children as to what happens when loss happens. What does that mean? What are these emotions? So that we actually, when we grow up, we are better equipped to do it. Because I definitely feel that had somebody shown me a way to unlock who I am and what's important to me many, many years ago, I don't think I would have had to go through quite so much pain as I had done. I think we also need people to be more understanding and supportive. So yeah, for me, it's crucial that those conversations continue to happen. So watch this space as to how that evolves, because lots for me is kind of just bubbling under the surface, which I'm kind of, there's only so many hours in the day, and as I say, I'm trying very hard not to work 14 hours a day and keep the weekends free. But yes, you can drop into the cafe experience. It's open to everybody. It's not via Zoom. It's using a system called Remo, which you still click on a link and you join it, and you'll see that when you enter into it, it's a bit like walking into a village hall, and there's tables everywhere, and there's it'll be silent to start with because there's a little introduction to all the facilitators, and then the facilitators go to a table, and then you just go and sit at a table, and then conversation starts. There is no expectation that you have to talk. There is no expectation that you will turn the camera on. And for me, we just accept you as you want to show up. And we have a variety of people, to the levels to which they want to talk or not talk. If they don't want to talk, then at the table, invariably you end up hearing more of my dulcet tones, but rather than just sit there in silence. But with all great respect to everybody who's on the table, I think sometimes it's that whole looking around the table and we don't know anybody, nervousness more than anything, and so somebody needs to step into the space, and then once somebody steps in, of course, everybody starts. And so, but I think it's so important to happen, and yeah, I agree, Sangeeta, it is so important to teach our children this, and I think it's also important to almost retrospectively teach our adults in workplaces about it as well. So this sort of whole educating part, which is my bridging the gap part of my business, is all about the education side, because there's no point in me working with the side that's who are in the pain, because once they leave the room, in inverted commas, they step out and they need to have a supportive, safe space in the rest of the world. Otherwise, any work that's done in that space, you know, can't be maintained. So it's kind of it's the whole 360 perspective, I guess. So I will share with, what's the best way for me to share the link? Or John, I can. Shall I share with you after, Chandra, the link to the Grief Cafe?
You can mail the link to me and I will pass it on to Alison and Joe, and they can share it in their groups as well. We can take it parallelly in both our groups, you know. So they will have access.
For sure. No, that's absolutely no problem. Do I believe in afterlife presence of my loved ones, and how do I live with reality and spirituality? Yes, I do believe in, I don't know whether would I necessarily go so far to say afterlife. Do I definitely believe that I am guided and I have a very, very strong sense of presence? Yes. So I was exceptionally close to my grandmother, and she kind of was more of a mother than my mother, really. And I remember very vividly, I was exceptionally in tune with her. And I remember vividly sitting in a sociology exam, and I felt absolutely awful. I felt really, really terrible, and couldn't work out where it all come from. Literally about a minute to 12, my headache had gone, my body felt fine again. And I knew my grandmother was in late stage stomach cancer, and I knew that it wasn't good because I'd seen her on the Sunday and I'd seen what she was like. And I called when I got home, and my mother wouldn't speak to me, first of all. And then I called her back and I said, Grandma died at 1 minute to 12, didn't she? And she said, yes. And that is the level of presence that I feel, which is why actually the conclusion they came to when my husband died, because they couldn't get to a diagnosis, and still can't now, ironically. And I've had mini episodes since, so it's always a constant reminder that I have to put myself first, that I took on the symptoms of pancreatic cancer because I was basically embracing my husband's death in a physical form, because they couldn't come up with any other medical reason for what had happened to me, which is, you know, I still find it strange. Even when I was hospitalized in January last year for, like I say, a mini version of what happened, it was a completely different hospital, so they had none of the background before, and they're all sitting there going, you know, have I drunk loads of alcohol? Have I taken paracetamol? Have I done all of it? And I just go, no, you know, nothing. The only thing I can tell you that's similar was the level of stress, per se, that I was having from previously when my husband died, and that was literally at the end of when my house project had finished. So I definitely have felt presence when, you know, I've just been woken up in the middle of the night and like felt my husband actually just there. You know, to the point of like really being shaken by it. So I definitely feel there is something there, but beyond that, what that is, I don't really kind of spend much time on it. I just acknowledge it, really. Yes, self first is definitely, yeah, it is. Yeah, I get very visible. I turn minion yellow when when I'm not looking after self. So it's definitely, you know, it's not a good look, I can tell you that. Have I gone to a medium? Yeah, I have gone to a medium, and I did get a level of, is it reassurance? I don't know. She shared with me that what I was doing was, you know, Chris was so proud of what I was doing, and that, you know, I was stepping forward. So yeah, I suppose in that sense it was reassuring, but did I get much more from it? Not necessarily, because I think I'd done so much work on myself and tried to find some meaning and understanding from what did I do next and how did I want to show up in the world, that felt true to who Chris was. Chris was an immensely intelligent man who loved working, he loved conversations, and I think it's that whole thing for me that by really embracing who he was and what he stood for, and this, he was always this sort of swan, is like very gracefully, you know, swimming around, but you know, he's what do you call it? I want to call them paws, but swans don't have paws. You know what I mean? Desperately paddling underneath the surface, but always serene on the outside. And I think, you know, that's what I wanted to take forward. And so knowing him so much in my heart and really connecting back with him through the work I did, I don't know whether I necessarily needed more from a medium personally. I'm just making sure I've read all of the questions. So, but yeah.
One addition, Anna is also a part of our conversation here, and Anna heads our Spanish-speaking HPH group. So your whatever is being shared will be shared with Anna's group as well. Anna is joining us from the US. I think it's very early in the morning that she is.
Yeah, it's also very early. So, like 1 a.m. or something.
Absolutely. There she is. Hi, Anna. Mute. You're muted, Anna. So we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted. Yes, I'm here in the US, in the eastern side. Okay. And I'm listening, so this is also very wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to. Sorry.
I was just going to ask if there are any more questions, or if I may share my. That's all right.
Yes.
So, with all your blessing, I would love to share with you just a little survey I asked just to get your feedback from today, and kind of what you took away, and if there is anything more that I can share with you beyond today. Now, I don't know whether you're on phones doing this or laptops, because we were trying to work out earlier on whether it's best to give you a QR code, because if you're on the laptop and you've got your phone, it can work with a QR code. So let me show you what I mean. It's a tiny little, so if you've got a phone separate to your laptop, all you need to do is basically scan that QR code, and that will automatically take you to the survey.
So people can take a screenshot on their phone as well, and then Laura will also share this by email, so that I can also share it with the other groups. So y'all can forward this to whoever is interested. I mean, whoever has participated. Sorry? Anna?
We will share the screenshot on our HP page. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you scanned it now, it would automatically take you to the survey via your phone. But if you're on a phone watching this, then you'll need the link separately later. But that's fine. I will keep it open.
So whatever you shared, Laura, about the Grief Cafe, about this link, will be passed on to all the other groups. It'll go to Anna and it'll go to Joe and Alison, so they can take that forward and share it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
yes.
lovely ladies.
Chandra will share it on HP. From there on, it can go further.
Perfect. Since there are no questions, I would like
I'm having some issues with my internet.
Yes. But you're still audible, Anna. So On behalf of Anil and me, I'd like to thank Laura. I think I took away quite a bit from today's conversation, and I know others have. So I'm just, it's just synchronicity. I'm very grateful for the universe for finding a pathway to her, which was so easy, and I have no words to express, just gratitude. Laura, thank you so much for being with us. And I will give a minute for anyone else who wants to butt in.
I just want to say thank you so much, Laura. It was beautiful conversing you over emails and meeting you, more wonderful meeting you in person. The emails built up this curiosity of.
Anil, start over again. We missed you a little bit.
I'm so sorry. The internet connection is very bad today. Laura, what I was telling is that I conversed with you over emails and your energy drew me so much. I felt I cannot just resist myself meeting Laura in person over Zoom, of course. But it was amazing meeting you. You are wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, all of you, for having me, really. I feel very, very honoured to have been asked to come and talk to you all today. So, I thank you all. And feel free to reach out afterwards if there is more that I can be of help with.
So at the end, I will put on, we have shared your contacts and your email addresses. I'll make sure that goes out as well, along with the QR code that you requested to all the groups. So anyone who wants to get in touch with you can do so directly. So I'm really thankful. It's been an amazing hour. It's not enough. So at some point, I see you coming back, either in one of these groups, either maybe with Alison or with us or somewhere. But it's not going to be a goodbye. So it's start of a journey with you. Thank you so much, Laura. Really, really.
No, thank you. Bless you. Thank you so much. Well, I hope you all have good mornings, good afternoons, good evenings.
Thanks, Laura, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, girls. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you. Laura, there has been a sharing of emails. So Joe has shared. I will share the emails also separately so that you have our emails as well. Okay?
Yeah. So I've picked up Joe's and Anna's emails. So I've got those too.
Yes.
So
it can go directly to them. I'm sure that they will be also interested in having a conversation separately,
Absolutely. So, but if anybody else comes to you directly, then please feel free to share. I'm most happy to.
Yes.
So,
this recording, I will share this recording also with you privately. I'll put it as a Google Drive link because the size will be much. So it may not be able to post. I will share you the link on Google Drive so that you can take it further. Yeah?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chandra.
Love you. Thank you so much.
No, my absolute pleasure. And I look forward to chatting soon.
Yes. 100%. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. My trip to Mumbai.
100%.
And allow us to leave the country.
So, it can't be only Mumbai because then Anil and I will start having a fight. So Ahmedabad is very nearby. At least 2 cities,
Okay, well, that's fine. I don't worry. I visited India a long time ago, but I do feel I have to go back and see a bit more.
See, now you have a cause and a reason to put, you have a face to put to that. Yeah, I can't risk. I can't risk Anil fighting with me. I can see the sword coming out of the.
I might have to be able to leave the country because I could say because it is work now. I can say that it's in my mission and in my work. You see.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Whereas it would have been only a holiday before.
I loved your references, the TARDIS and Winnie the Pooh. Oh my God! And now I know who the Ior is. Annal is the Ior, the sneezing donkey. Anyways, the cute little Ior.
So what with sneezing donkeys, Tigger and Eeyore, etc. We're doing well for animals today.
Yeah, I think she's kind of gone on mute again. I don't know. Anyways,
Yeah.
she's sneezing again. Okay, so I end the session.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much, Laura. We'll be in touch. It's not a good
Yeah,
plan.
likewise. Bless you.
Bye.
Thank you
Love
so
you.
much.
Love you. Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye, Anna. Anna, good morning and bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Anna.
Bye, Anna.
Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Thank you for everything.